You're listening to a DM podcast.
We would like to acknowledge and give thanks to the traditional owners of the land we record this podcast on, the Yagara and Turrbal people,
and their continued connection to the land and waterways on which we meet. Hello and welcome to Sportish, where we're talking about life through the lens of sport. We have a very special guest with Justin Scarr, who is the CEO of Royal Lifesaving Australia. And Georgie and I have spoken a lot about the importance of swimming, particularly. I like to bang on and on and on about that. And poor Georgie.
I tolerate it.
You tolerate me. But there was a report that was released earlier in the year from Royal Lifesaving Australia that talked about how behind a lot of, particularly the Year 6 students are in terms of benchmarks in safety. And we wanted to bring Justin on today to talk about where we're lagging behind and how we might be able to change the direction of where we're going. So thank you so much, Justin, for joining us this morning.
Not a problem. Really great to be here. And the good news is I like to bang on about swimming as well. So
you are in a safe space.
Yes.
So Justin, tell us about the statistics that you guys recently reported on.
Yeah, look, I think it's really quite shocking for many Australians to contemplate the notion that around about half of children leave primary school not being able to swim 50 metres. And we use 50 metres as a bit of a proxy. Length of a swimming pool, a good swimming pool in most community areas. But it's sort of an indication that children have achieved those foundational skills that will introduce them into a lifetime of enjoying the water, loving the water, but also keep them safe in and around the sorts of activities that they're likely to do as adolescents or young people where we see drowning spike.
I'm really interested to understand what happens in those more junior years and the formative years and why we're seeing really great learn to swim rates and really good engagement in that 0 to 5 category. And what happens then when we step into primary school?
The ecosystem has changed quite considerably over generations. Traditionally in the 60s and 70s, when all of our great swimming pools were built, learn to swim happened largely in a school context, or it happened in the upper primary school years. The idea that there was a swim school on almost every street corner now was just non-existent. So families essentially, particularly swimming families, taught their kids to swim themselves, introduced them to a range of water contexts, or they relied on the school system to catch them as they were getting to the ages of 8, 9 and 10. That changed considerably in probably throughout the 90s and into the 2000s, whereas now learn to swim is humming, and it's humming at the preschool age. Many families, particularly parents, really feel that pressure to enrol their kids early. It started off when we saw really high rates of drowning in young children in backyard swimming pools. Organisations like Royal Lifesaving, Laurie Lawrence, we really worked hard to promote pool fencing supervision, but we also introduced water familiarisation for babies. And that's exploded, which means that if you've got the means, you enrol your children early and you go often, and you spend a reasonable amount of money, but by the time the child is 4, 5, 6 and 7, parents say it's a real struggle to keep them in programs. And of course, we're not even talking about the families that can't afford private learn to swim at this point.
That's something that I've been talking about with my kids because one of them isn't so interested in swimming, but we have a backyard pool, and I've just said that it's absolutely a non-negotiable that we have to continue to learn to swim because she says that she knows how to swim. And I said, that's great. You're 5 years old and you need to get that confidence. You need to get that strength. But we're really starting to see that decline, not just in that upper sort of primary level, but even by year 10, they're still not hitting those benchmarks that we'd like to see.
Yeah, absolutely staggering. Like, not only do many children not swim before the end of primary school, but the data shows it doesn't get much better in high school. So they don't miraculously learn in high school. In many respects, kids who can't swim in high school stay quiet. They miss out on the carnival. They bring in a sick note when it's swimming activity for phys ed. They're probably the reason many high schools now are backing away from outdoor recreation activities like going kayaking or participating in water sports like water polo and those sorts of things socially. So it really does have a knock-on effect in terms of that wonderful sort of cultural understanding of what it means to be Australian. You love the water, you enjoy the water, and you're very competent in the water. So we need to do two things. I think we need to cheer on those families that are able to enrol their kids early and go often. Maybe they've got a backyard pool. That's a really significant motivation for getting your children in to learn to swim. we cheer on those families, but we really got to be really focused on the families that miss out and look at the reasons why they miss out. And that's sort of really quite complex. It might be as simple as they simply don't have the money to afford lessons at the right ages. It might be that they have to go too far to go to the local pool. It might be 20 minutes away, which is unrealistic. No public transport. They rely on the school system, so we've got to cheer on the education departments and make sure that they're boosting opportunities, particularly for those kids that miss out. And we've got to figure out what's going on in high schools and how we can turn that around, because the lowest rates of drowning in Australia are actually 10-year-olds. But that increases tenfold by the time a person turns 20.
Wow.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, when you think about it, most 10-year-olds are well supervised by parents and families and uncles and aunts. But by the time you get to 13, 14, 15, you're out and about in the local community without any supervision. And so drowning sneaks up on families at that point, because adolescents are more likely to be hanging out with friends near the water and usually a long, long way from lifeguards.
I know that when you talk to some people, they might be like, well, why do we have to have swimming carnivals? Why are they so important? Why is the participation in a swimming carnival a marker? And I think it's really important to remember that it's a marker of safety. And if you can't swim, and this is what the research is bearing out, if you can't swim 25 metres to participate in a school swimming carnival, then you're not safe enough to be at the beach necessarily.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what you were saying, Justin, around the knock-on effect of the kayaking. Like, I wouldn't have even thought, like, if someone's not confident enough to swim, then of course they're going to be scared when it comes to participating in those sorts of recreational activities that they might have at school or might be trying with friends. That's a really scary thing.
I think about the first time I went sailing was like as an 11-year-old at a sport and recreation camp. And no, I'm not a great sailor. I really loved it. But I guess that was under the supervision of the system and school teachers and the like. So when you think about people in high school having opportunities to kayak, maybe stand up paddleboard, maybe go to the beach and paddle on a surfboard, all of these things within the system, if it's provided within the school system, it's well supervised. But if the school system doesn't have the confidence because not enough kids can swim, it's likely those children are going to introduce themselves to those high-risk activities by themselves with friends, unsupervised. I think it's misunderstood just how big an impact that's having on our rates and drowning incidents. I think swimming skills are foundational. They really do have a flow-on effect to the joy of being in the water, but most importantly, safety as well. So we've got to figure this out. I think that when we release the research about school carnivals, Georgie's absolutely right. It's an indicator of a sickness. There's something going wrong. If schools can't run a carnival, but the good swimmers are still going to the regionals and they're still making states and they're still ending up as great swimmers, it's all those kids that are missing out. It's an indication that something's wrong. We've got to do something urgently to fix this.
I think as well, that's a really startling fact for me, that we can be a country that produces so many elite Olympic level swimmers and perform above and beyond where we should, given our size of population. And yet we have this incredible disparity where you have the kids who can swim and go to nationals and regionals and all that sort of thing, and then a huge group who just can't even get to the end of the pool. I think that really speaks to the problem we have in the system at the moment.
The two things are really deeply connected, right? Our love of Olympic swimmers actually is tied to our cultural love of swimming. But it's deeply ingrained. The Americans win gold medals occasionally, Chinese too, but actually culturally they're not known for loving the water and being competent around the water at a population level.
Just so many of them that they have a huge pool of talent.
Yeah, that's right. So I do think that there's a connection here. So we've got to advocate very strongly for access to pools in local communities. When we're talking about Olympic legacy, the Melbourne Olympic legacy was really this enthusiasm for swimming that produced communities volunteered all across the country to dig fresh swimming pools. And they may not have been FINA compliant at the time. They might have been 48 metres, not 50 metres. But actually it created these generations of people that went, yes, I can swim. And there's a pool down the road for me to have a crack whenever I want. So this sort of egalitarian access to pools, I think, is really quite important. And there are too many pools across the country that are needing a lot of love. Many of them are closing down. And you see this in the newspapers regularly, where communities are outraged by the idea that their pool is closed and it won't be open for 2 years. And then they hear that the building costs have blown out, it's still not open. So the two things are connected. School swimming and access to a good local pool, I think, are two ways that we can work together to turn this around.
But wouldn't it be amazing if the Brisbane 2032 Olympic legacy would be making sure that the pools are good and remaining open and, learn to swim lessons for everyone in Australia? That would be amazing. We're not aiming big, just, reasonable stuff.
I can imagine a dais in every community in Australia, right? And the kids on that dais, there's a whole kind of school population of them that have all achieved a swimming benchmark of being able to swim 50 metres. Really.
Yes, I love that.
And it can be that simple.
Let's put a dais in every school and get every kid on top of it.
And we should say this, we don't see this as just being an education system issue. Teachers already have a lot on their plates. We've heard from them
support.
And we know that this is something that they're really grappling with because they can see the issues they have with these kids not being able, in grade 6 to swim 25 metres. They can't host primary school carnivals. And that's not necessarily the school's fault. It needs to be a community-based effort to deal with this very tricky problem.
I could make an outrageous statement bashing teachers and you'll get lots of feedback, not necessarily great feedback. When we release a report about children's swimming skills, I like to see the discussion trails that follow, right? And so people, I think, recognise that there's a lot of pressure on schools and teachers. They don't necessarily see it as the panacea, but they also recognise the value of the safety net that schools can provide. And in fact, there are some really great school-based programs across the country, and we want to boost those. We want to protect them so that they're not eroded, but we want to give school teachers and principals the resources to make decisions to identify the kids that really need a leg up. The other thing I think that's really important is we used to have, and we still have in some states, some really great vacation programs. We've got to make more of those, the school holiday periods, to grab those kids that have missed out and give them a dose of life-saving and swimming, survival swimming. And so a broad sort of range of skills and experiences in the water that perhaps that they're not getting in private learn to swim. And we've got to figure out how to ensure that all Australians, irrespective of their backgrounds, and I guess I'm talking about migrant Australians mostly, that perhaps the parents can't swim. And so they're not naturally seeing or thinking about just how accessible it is to walk down to the local swimming school or swimming pool and sign up for some lessons and hang in there for long enough for their child to be able to swim a decent distance, because it really is a passport to a lot of fun and a little bit of safety in a place like Australia.
Justin, we are cheering you on. This is a subject that Libby and I will continue to follow up because we recognise how important it is. We think as an Olympic city here in Brisbane in particular, it needs to be something that we're pushing forward for the nation to make sure that swimming, being the beautiful life skill it is, doesn't fall by the wayside in, I guess, all of our busy lives.
Yeah, Justin, thank you so much for your time today. It's not just one factor that's going to fix this, and we can't wait to see, we'll continue to see the work that Royal Lifesaving Australia is doing in this space, and we are cheering you on in every way that we can.
Yeah, it's going to take a crowd to make this happen, so I appreciate your support and everyone else that's getting behind the push to make sure that children can swim.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.